Blackburn women's teams is no more, but what about the opinion of the fans? What do they think about the collapse of Blackburn Rovers women's game? We're going to take a look at that and much more next. That's right, folks, back once again in another video today. We're taking a look at the women's team, that's right, the lack of it. Of course, the massive decision to disband the women's team. We'll get into all of that in a second. If you're new, where you been? Smash your subscribe. You want some for Blackburn Rovers, World Football, Women's Football. We're going to, here, under one roof. That's right. Maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Steve Waggett, of course, was not having it. With the disabandonment of the women's game. Well, what about the fans? What do they think? Well, I've got some good opinion coming at you in just 1 second. Big shout out to the members and the patrons, of course. But before we jump into that, I'm going to hand you over to Eddie to talk all things away day travel. Tell them what you're talking about, Eddie.
Ewood Eddie here with some news on our brand new scheme we're looking to implement in the 2025-2026 campaign. What is it? Well, it's affordable away day travel. That's right. Us at Blackburn Rovers hope to implement this brand new scheme for each and every one of the away days taking place in the upcoming campaign. Right now, we're just in the planning stages and we want to know if you are interested in away day travel for the upcoming season. Now, what I need you to do now is, of course, go to this link on the screen right about now. It's a QR code, or maybe drop down in the old description to follow the URL and fill out your name and, of course, maybe some contact information that we can reach out to you when we are 100% committed. Just a reminder that this is just the planning stage of this service. Nothing is 100% as of yet. But the more numbers and the names that we get down in the next few weeks, then, of course, then we'll have the ability to make this happen for you guys. Again, looking at what's available at the moment, this does look like an affordable option if we can get the support from you guys. And again, it's just a fantastic way for you to support the channel in another way. Back to you, Dirk, in the studio.
Thanks again, Eddie. Of course, yes, we're going to talk about all things women's game and, of course, the dismemberment of that women's game. We were in the second tier, I believe, in the women's game. But let's get the opinions of the Rovers mafioso. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, you say the fans. Sorry to interrupt here, but you say the fans. Let's be honest. When it was all this Wagger out and all that good stuff, there's only about 200 down at the front of the Blackburn end. Do you know what I mean? So that's, I'm not questioning their loyalty to the club or anything like that, but it wasn't a mass protest or something like that. Steve Waggett not coming to a game doesn't change anything for me, sort of thing. Whether he's there, whether he's not, sort of thing. What does change for me is what the players are feeling on the pitch, sort of thing. All that unrest and things like that. That just reverberates. It doesn't matter if one guy's there or not, sort of thing. So, I think it's a sad state of affairs to watch, sort of thing, and we don't need that crap. I think it's human nature to remember all the rubbish stuff that Steve Waggett's done, but also I think he's done some good stuff. Convincing Tony Mowbray to stay when we went down into League One as well. I believe there was a release clause if we did get relegated, which I think, looking back now, it was inevitable that we were always going to get relegated in that particular season. But for him to actually say to Tony Mowbray, you got us, not him single-handedly, but he retained a lot of players there and had the belief that we could get straight back up. And, I've said for a long time now, God forbid, if we'd stayed down any longer than that one season, we would have seen the whole squad and team just diminish into absolutely nothing. So, I think my biggest frustration with Steve Waggett at the beginning was the lack of communication to the fans and just what was generally going on in the club. Now, that never got to an acceptable level, but it got to it has been ever so slightly improved, especially over the last 2 years, sort of thing. So, yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's going to be, time will tell. But my gut feeling at this very, very early stage is I think we will be sorry that he went.
Yeah. Well, I again, I'm like you. I think it could reap its benefits, but it could also reap some major, more disasters around the corner. But what I can say is probably it could be time for a change in that area. Maybe a younger CEO who's more in touch with the modern world or modern ways of life could be the right ticket for Blackburn Rovers. But one thing that appears to be the final straw with Waggett was this. That is, of course, if I can get it on the screen, the women's team. That's right. So Yes,
I thought it was
every
going to be a picture of Denver.
no, it's the women's team.
The
So
final straw, it was Denver.
rumor has it that this was the final straw that caused his resignation. That he was not going to. He was. Well, let's not bury the lead here. So the women's team got defunded and have now been pushed all the way down to the lower echelons of women's football. And Wagger was not a fan of this decision, and I think it's something words to the like of, "I'm not saying this," or "I'm not going to," whatever. But basically, this led to him announcing his departure early doors. So it does seem that he was an advocate of the women's game. I don't know. I'm not putting words in his mouth or anything like that, but this could be, and maybe puts him in a bit of good light. Denver, what's your take on, of course, first and foremost, the removal of Blackburn Rovers women's team? I think they were in the second tier, and of course, and Waggett's alleged stance on that.
Well, so this is, of course, an interest of mine just because of the industry, of course, that I work in, and I work for a women's team, not of Blackburn Rovers' caliber, of course, but still a significant, Welsh side, and as a Blackburn fan, I was really gutted. Look, I'm not saying, I'm one of these fans who I don't get to every men's game. I try to get as many games as I can. I'm not an avid Blackburn Rovers women fan. I'm not going to all the games myself personally, but that down to commitment to work and whatever, and of course my true passion for Blackburn Rovers is in the men's team. Saying that though, the fact that we've not been able to, we're in a position where the women's team is the women's football is definitely growing without a shadow of a doubt, and later on down a few years time it's gonna be there. It's gonna be in the case of it's gonna bring money to the club. And you just look at it now. You look at the likes of your Chelsea's, your Arsenals, who have fully established women's teams, and it might compare, nothing compares to the men's numbers, but it's definitely significant, and especially if you want to promote the club in the aspect of, and if you want to sell onto the club, the fact that you've got rid of an asset of the club in the fact that the women's team and the position that they were in is always going to hurt the club, and it's just not a great look, and especially as we've announced that we're not going to be able to fund our women's team, and the decision to be made, and I think today of all days, I think the manager and the assistant managers and the assistant head coaches have all left their roles, understandably. I don't know how much of that on both parts, but Burnley have literally just made their women's team full time, and that's the thing where you look at that, they're making the women's team full time. Why can't we? And I know it's an owner's decision, and that's the output. They seem to feel like, look, and I've seen comments from other Blackburn fans and so on saying, oh look, let's put all the money towards the men's team. That's where the revenue is. Blah 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 blah. And it's like, look down in 15, 20 years time, where is that revenue going to be? Do we want to be one of the big clubs in the women's league? We want to be playing in the Premier League against the Barcelonas, the Arsenals, and so on and so forth. And it's there for us to do if you really want to do it. And we decided not to do it because it was too much of a cost. We prioritised the men's side of things, which is sad for women's football in general, and the girls who, a set of fans that potentially we could have had are now maybe disinterested and have a look elsewhere. But yeah, it's just like it is disappointing. Especially I wasn't happy. I was really not happy when the decision was made to do that. I could see it coming, and I understand it from that perspective. But it's definitely going to harm us in the long run more than it will do good. Yes, it might cost us a few, however much money. I don't think they were on loads, but the disparity before that, like I've had friends who have played for Blackburn. I'm not going to name names, but like who've played there, come to me because they coach with me now, and they said how bad it was. Like just the environment in general, the payments, and so the women's team had to go and train with. They were based not at Brookhall, but the academy. So they would be based on the academy side of things, the boys side of things, where the senior had their own place, and it wasn't good for a long period of time. So it's not necessarily like this is a big surprise. I think some of the women's players have voiced their stuff on social media. And I know a few of them myself. So yeah, it is just disappointing. I'm not surprised by the owner's decision to do this. It's just another what next? Like, what cuts are going to be cost? Is the men's team ultimately going to be next? The academy, are they going to take them from, because we're a category A at the minute, or the best standard of academy? Oh, you know what? We can't afford that. We're going to bring it down. Like, the standards are just dropping as we speak, and it's just harming the value of the club massively. So
sad times.
Yeah.
Jotty, what about your take on the women's, and maybe in regards to Waggett's final statement or final words as CEO in regards to the women's? Again, not putting words in his mouth, but that's what I'm led to believe, that this was the straw that broke his camel's back, sort of thing, and kind of forced his resignation or what have you.
Yeah, the reality is we probably don't know until, if there's an autobiography that comes out for Steve Waggett and the truth comes out. But at this moment in time, it's just hearsay. My personal take on it, sad has been bandied around. I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame, but I had no emotional attachment to Blackburn Rovers ladies, and I don't want to sound, derogatory. I don't want to sound sexist, and there's a fine line in all of this, but I just genuinely didn't. I've got 36, 37 years worth of history with Blackburn Rovers men's team. That's all that was about available, when I was a supporter. I appreciate there's new supporters coming through, but 200 fans at a home game is not commercially viable. And we talk about, that football's a business. And unfortunately, the business has done the talking. Denver mentioned that Burnley have got the full-time Burnley women's team and things like that. That's great. Maybe we would have done, and we could have kept them going if, we'd just been promoted to the Premier League and what have you, and we just had, 3 or 4 or 5, however many parachute payments they've had. But when everything, including home attendances at the men's game, is not brilliant, then unfortunately, you've got to look after number one. There's a reason why they always say on a plane, put your own oxygen mask on first, and for me, that's what it feels like very much so in this. I'm sure it's a tough decision that why the Venkies have made, or whoever made that decision, but it's just not commercially viable, and I feel disappointed saying this, but there's no point in having a women's team, but having a men's team in League Two, because 150 years or 149, 150 years worth of history is there, for it. So, like I say, me personally, I never went to one game. I probably would have done. It was probably just a matter of time, but for me, there's a bit of a same old story evolving. You look at the successful women's teams at the minute. It's your Man Cities, it's your Chelseas, it's your Arsenals. I think Man United. People like that. I don't know. I've not taken that much interest because I've no emotional attachment in it. So I appreciate it's going to attract a different kind of audience, sort of thing, and an interesting question for me is, could you support Blackburn Rovers men's team, but Man United's women's team, for example, would that have happened? Who knows? But it's a shame. It's 10 years we might live to regret the decision, sort of thing, but you've got to work at this moment in time, and this moment in time, it wasn't feasible, viable option for Blackburn Rovers. We're struggling for attendances, we're struggling to pay wages, we're struggling to keep hold of players. For me, it was the right decision, as much as it pains me to say that. I work for a global company, and we have some really, really successful and really brilliant ladies in all of that. So, I'm an advocate for all of this equalness and equality and what have you. But at this moment in time, for Blackburn Rovers Football Club, for me, it was the right thing to do.
So can I quickly say something on that? So
Go for it.
Of course, I have a little bit of bias, maybe not towards the Blackburn Rovers side of things, but just women's football in general, because I advocately push it all the time. But so and that's the thing that I see with a lot of fans saying, that we're balancing the books, we're in that position, and I completely get that. So in my eyes, I'm thinking, if you're not able to fund a successful football club, and what I mean by that is support all areas of it, how can you say that you're and this is the argument that clubs will always have, is how can Venky say that they're able to sustain supporting a football club if they're having to cut back on multiple areas, having to self-relegate one of their teams 2 divisions below because they can't fund it. Could you
Yeah,
say
but
the same with the men's team? Imagine, vice versa. Choosing the thought you support the men's team, the women's team are really successful. All the money's comes to the women's team. We can't support it, or we'll relegate us into League Two because we can't afford it. You wouldn't be happy, would you? And it's one of them where like it's devaluing the club, and if the Venkies can't sustain that, why are they still hanging on to us? Why are they still like?
no, it's a good question. I think the only thing I would say in defence, 15 years ago when they bought Blackburn Rovers, there's no such thing as a women's team, or
Yep.
not in its
Yeah.
capacity now, sort of thing. So, in the spirit of fairness, you've got to all things considered, sort of thing. It's only in the last 5, 6, 7 years that women's football's really taken off, and it's like I say, I think it was only a matter of time before I started going to maybe a women's game. I know one of my colleagues, he goes religiously. He takes his son to all these different grounds. He was at Leicester City just the other night for England versus Switzerland. So, it's. I think I would have gone, but when you look at like the under-21s game that I went to not that long ago at Ewood, I think we had about 400 or 500 for the under-21s, which is okay. It's fine. But when your average attendance for the ladies' home game is 200, and let's be absolutely perfectly honest here, we ain't going to compete with your Chelseas, your Uniteds, your Cities, and things like that. You know what I mean? Yes, we've brought a few England players through, but I think that's all we were ever going to be. I just tough decision, horrible decision. Like you say, it's not a good look, but for me, you've got to sometimes put your own oxygen mask on.
Last bit, Dirk, before we move on. Last bit, Dirk. So, and I get all those points, but then at the same time, why are we saying that we can't compete with the likes of Man Cities, with the likes of Chelsea, with the likes of these massive clubs? It's because of the backing they have as owners. No, so that's my question now. Look, you might not be able to fund as a championship club. You might not be able to, fund as much as But for me, if you're looking at it from just as you look how big this game could potentially be. If I was in charge, for example, I'm looking at it going, look, yeah, maybe the revenue isn't now, but in 15, 20 years time, if we put our eggs in this basket now, we push this team now, where there's an opportunity here for us to break into a position where Blackburn Rovers, we're in a position in the country where we can, the hand-me-downs of your Liverpools, your Man Cities, your stuff, you can pull these players in on the cheap, and you can really push this women's team into that stratosphere. You never know what's going to happen if you're in that conversation in a few years' time. Now we are 3-4 divisions away from that, and you're not going to attract those players now. And the women's team is a debunk that you're not going to get into that. In 15, 20 years' time, where teams who decided to put that little bit in now for the future. I know, look, as Venkies now, you can't look at it like that, and that's the bit for me. Like as a club, if you can't progress the club, why are you still in charge? You look at your Wrexhams, your Birminghams now who've just come up, who are going, do you know what, we want to. Where's that? That's not our ambition. We are, let's survive, and we're not going to track the men's. We're not going to track these numbers, and it's not just about money. It's about. It's that's the issue, and it grows bigger than just the women's game.
The examples you've given are all the teams and clubs that are doing, successful. Your Wrexhams, your Birminghams, and what have you. But also equally, you've got to look at the clubs which are really struggling under pressure. Leicester City, Sheffield Wednesday, for example. There's plenty of other clubs as well, which you could argue maybe has not been managed right. But yeah, for me, this moment in time, somebody said that if somebody had done like a bit of a forecast, and I'm sure they've done all this, that women's team to get them, full time and all of that is going to cost us, I don't know, pie in the sky figure, £2.5 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for where we are now. I don't disagree with you. If we had a Jack Walker, we'd be beating your Chelsea's, your United's, and the women's teams, I'm sure. But we're not in that space, are we? So you've got to cut your cloth accordingly sometime. Listen, I don't disagree with you. It's a crying shame. I'd love to have representation of Blackburn Rovers women. I think, like I said to you, it was only a matter of time before I personally went down and supported the girls. But at this moment in time, given the club, given everything that we've gone through, that we are, and maybe Steve Waggett has walked because of that decision. It might have been something that he was really, really passionate about, and would that get him more kudos? Who knows? Who knows? Dirk, you've been very quiet in all of this. What's your take on it?
Good. I wanted my little 2 cents. So I listed, you both have got good points, and I'm glad I got you two to talk it out because Denver's definitely pro women football. I'm not saying Jonty's not pro women, but I'm a bit of Denver here. I'm a bit on the fence myself because if we were the Burnley, the yo-yo club that they are at the moment, they are getting the money in. Yes, you can have a little play, not calling it a plaything, but the women's will be a plaything. You could subsidize that with your 20, 30, 40 million you get from your yo-yo thing. We haven't seen those money days in a long, long time. To take on that commitment, it costs a fair, pretty penny, and we aren't in that. We are not in that wheelhouse at the moment. So I would love to have it, and I was very excited for it, and I was even looking to do some more digging into the women's game in regards to making content, but we're not in there. It's unfortunate that we are, and it's unfortunate to watch those 6-fingered freakazoids down the road taking the women's talent away. But that's just where we are, and it's a shame that we're in that pickle. And I don't think. Well, I hope it's not a scenario where the academy is next, and that has to be scaled back, and at the detriment of the main money. I don't even know. We don't even want to call us money makers, but the next branch of the Blackburn Rovers brand that gets scaled back. So I'm hoping that we do see the Premier League days very, very soon, and then maybe they could reignite that women's game and put more funding in there. But we need that promotion. And we also need people in the hierarchy to be reinterested in the club again. Because right now, Blackburn Rovers owners, they don't give 2 shits. They've got all the legal cases going on, and we got left with Ali, whatever his name is, who I don't even know. I don't know what he's just his own thing. But I just think we need and maybe change what Waggett appeared to be a pro guy for the women's game. Who knows what this new CEO is, but kind of just getting new faces involved in Blackburn Rovers. Thanks again, guys, for all your input on the women's game, and of course, much, much more. Of course, big shout out to those guys, and of course, big shout out to you. Subscribe, your one-stop shop for Blackburn Rovers is here. But before we go, I want to chuck you back over to Eddie to talk all things Blackburn Rovers memories. We need every one of you to come in and help us out.
Hey, with Eddie back once again, but this time I don't want your money. No, I want your name, your voice, your Rovers memories. That's right. We started a social media project over on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, showcasing 150 Blackburn Rovers memories. I've asked fans from around the globe to drop their Rovers memories, but of course I need more of them. That's right, 150 is a big number, and we need some more, and that's where you come in. That's right, whether it's the best player, best goal, best shirt, best moment in regards to Blackburn Rovers, I want to hear about it. So if you want to do that, again, follow that link. There is also one down in the description, and drop it in there. Of course, that memory will be featured over on Twitter on a day of its own, and then of course together in a master video when we drop it on November the 5th to celebrate Blackburn Rovers 150th anniversary. So please do me a favour and drop your Rovers memory. But anyway, once again, back to Dirk to wrap up.
Thanks again, Eddie. That's right. Of course, we're going to keep you bang up to date with any developments, of course, in Blackburn Rovers, whether it's the women game or whether it's, of course, men's team, whatever you have it, right here under One Roof. So make sure you subscribe, smash the like. I'll see you soon when we return. But until then, we're done.